I know I'm the only thing between you and the announcement you're waiting to hear. And I know that even with that introduction, some of you are saying, come on, tell me again why a photographer was chosen to talk to this girl. Look, the only reason I'm here is to share with you the best that I've learned in my life. Just like you do every day with your distributors and your customers, the best that you have in your life. Don't take notes. You've taken enough notes already over the last couple of days. What I'd like you to do is just to join me, to help me in creating right here, right now, in creating a little history, in creating an extraordinary vision. A vision that I think we all know is possible every day if we just have the courage to manifest it. Extraordinary visions. As a photographer for National Geographic, I created a lot of them. How do we do it? I can sum it up in 4 words: vision, passion, purpose, and creativity. Those are the 4 things I want to talk to you about this morning and how they all go together to create something truly superlative. I'll show you some of my images, but the visions that I'm really interested in exploring, they're not photographic. They're just the visions we have for our lives, both personally and professionally, and how extraordinary they can be. When I was a kid, I grew up in a family with a dad that used to tell me stories. My father told me lots and lots of stories, and all of my father's stories had lessons. I began to hate stories. Most of those lessons, right over my head, but occasionally one of them would stick. And I want to begin with a story. It's an old story, probably some of you know it. But I tell it because it's a story that really shifted my perspective on life. He told me a story about 2 men laboring in a courtyard in medieval Italy. And they sat, in the heat of the noonday sun, drenched in sweat, chipping in blocks of marble. One man's face downcast, shoulders bent, muscles straining. And a priest crossing the courtyard looked beside him, looked down and said, "What are you doing, my son?" And without looking up, the man answered, "I am chipping stone." The priest turned to the other man. His shoulders too were bent, his muscles strained, but his face. His face was a smile and his eyes just full of that joyful effort of passion. "What are you doing?" "I am building a cathedral. I am building a cathedral." That story got to me. Because I kept thinking, these 2 guys are looking at exactly the same thing. And one is a stone chipper and the other is a cathedral builder. And the only difference was vision. Vision. I knew which one I wanted to be. No idea how to do that. There are not a lot of books on cathedral building for young men around, And besides, I was a kid, I still held that maxim, I won't believe it until I see it. That's how we all start out. We all start out needing those teachers, those mentors, those seminal experiences in our lives that show us what's possible. This was one of those for me, the National Geographic. Maybe it was for many of you. My family took this magazine long before I was born. By the time I got to be able to read, I'd grab it when it came into the house, I'd take it upstairs, I'd read it at night, My dad would say, "Turn off the light, Dewitt, go to bed." Turn the light back on. I'd get a flashlight. I'd stay up and stare at the photos in this little yellow book. Pictures that showed me the possibilities the world had to offer. I'm not the only geographic freak out there, I know that. I had an elderly gentleman come up out of an audience recently. He said, "I love the Geographic. I read the Geographic because it takes me to places I will never go." It's the same reason I read Playboy, he said. I never thought I'd shoot for them. I never thought I'd work for them. But they began to influence my vision long before I even knew I was a photographer. Because they had a wonderful vision. So simple, yet so profound. What they charged me with every time they sent me out was to celebrate what was right with the world, rather than wallowing in what was wrong. That's why we keep those silly yellow magazines. It's a national sacrilege to throw away a Geographic, you know that. If all the Geographics in the country disappeared at one time, half the houses would fall in on themselves because they're supported by big yellow columns in the basement. Because they celebrate what's right with the world. So I'd look at those pictures with that vision, and I'd fall in love. I'd fall in love with the world. And I'd feel what you always feel when you fall in love. I'd feel passion. You know, that energy that rises up from within. Great visions do that. They release passion. That energy just seems encoiled inside. I'd look at those pictures with that vision and that energy, and in that moment, I'd transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. That's the moment of creativity. That's the moment of creativity. I think that's really all creativity is. That moment where we get up and we look at what's ordinary, but what we see is extraordinary. And we do that when we fall in love. When we fall in love. With ourselves, with our spouse, with our family, with our clients, with our distributors, with our customers, with our community, with our country, with the world. At that moment, we stop being stone chippers and start to become cathedral builders and begin to focus an extraordinary vision for our lives. I had another experience when I was a freshman at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. Another experience that filled me with vision and passion. And I remember one evening, the whole school gathering together in a hall just like this to hear a grand old man say his poetry. And it was the poet Robert Frost, just the year before he died. Talk about passion. For 2 hours, 84, 85 years old, this man just held us in the palm of his hands, igniting us with his visions. And then he read from a poem called Two Tramps in Mud Time. He read words I'll never forget. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation, as my two eyes make one in sight. Only when love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sake.
Oh, God.
My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation. My vocation, what I had to do, what they paid me to do. My avocation, what I couldn't help but do. What I love to do. As my two eyes make one in sight. And as I listened to Frost, I realized that on one hand, he was saying, do what you love. And most of you, probably all of you in this room, do and are lucky enough to do what you love. But also, he was saying, at any time, we have that choice to love what we do. To love what we do, no matter what life throws at us. To get up and love it. Boy, that night, Frost took me out of the ordinary, showed me the extraordinary, and made me feel it. So, you know, I'd had visionary teachers and mentors. I've been shown passion and possibility, but as everybody in this room knows, you can't live it through others. You gotta make it your own. You gotta move from imagination to imagine action. And I think the first time that happened to me is when I got to be a senior at Dartmouth. I'd been a drama major. I had no idea how I was going to make my living as a dramatist. I did not want to go to New York and starve, so being a smart young kid, I applied and I was accepted into Harvard Business School. My father said, thank God. Kid's going to be off the dole, it's all going to work, you know. Probably would have worked out fine. But spring term of my senior year, 3 of us guys got together one night and we just began to vision, to dream, to imagine what we could do after graduation. We could do anything we wanted. And the hour got later and the visions got grander, and sometime after midnight we came up with this idea of kayaking 1,100 miles up the coast of Japan. Seemed like a heck of an idea at the time, you know? And I said, I'll make a movie out of it. I never made a movie before in my life. But I got up the next day with my first real vision and the passion that that vision brought with it. And so I withdrew my acceptance to Harvard and applied out to UCLA Film School to learn how to make movies. My father said, we've lost him. I I went out to what he still refers to as the land of nuts and flakes. I got into the store. I got with some of the second-year graduate students because they knew some about making movies. I didn't. And together we wrote this great letter to the National Geographic Society about this hot young film director from Hollywood, who was going to make this great movie for him. Sent it off. Lo and behold, I got a letter back. I got a letter back from the Geographic. It said, "Dear Mr. Jones, we're very interested in your proposal. We'd like to have you come to Washington, and when you do, bring some samples of your work." Nothing. So in a week and a half, I made a 15-minute documentary on Alvera Street, a little Mexican street in the middle of LA. Picked it up from a lab on a Monday morning, got on a plane, flew to Washington, walked into a Tuesday meeting, said, "This is just a little something I picked off the shelf." It was still wet, you know. And they looked at it. It was a terrible little film, but it was mine. And they finally said, "Okay, we'll tell you what we'll do. We'll send along our Hollywood film crews to follow you guys up the coast. You take the trip, we'll make the movie." 23 years old, I stood up in the meeting, I said, "No way." I said, "If I don't make the film, it doesn't get made." And they said, "It doesn't get made." So I came back to my dorm room, and I am bummed, man. I had that vision, I had the passion, I could see that movie. I was scared too. I just got whomped in that meeting. And I thought, what's the fear to it? Do you really think they're going to drag you out behind the Geographic and break your thumbs if you ask twice? What's another perspective? What's another focus? So I sat down and I wrote Mel Payne, the president of the Society, a letter. Poured out my heart to him. Poured out my vision to him about why I ought to make that movie. And he read that letter, and he caught that vision. Because 3 weeks later, he called the head of the television department and said, "Give the kid the money and let him go." And there I was, having never made a major film before in my life, about to make my first for National Geographic. Went to Japan, paddled up the coast. I made the film. It was shown on TV in this country. It was syndicated in Europe. It was on the BBC. And whoa, I was a filmmaker. And I learned something incredibly important from that. I didn't really have the words to it till years later when I saw that movie Dead Poets Society. Remember that? Starred Robin Williams. He plays an English teacher. One day he runs into his class, leaps up on his desk, raises his hand and yells, "Carpe diem!" Seize the day. Seize the day. That's what that was all about. I learned if you pushed hard enough on life, it connected and pushed back. I learned that I could dream, the wildest dreams imaginable and at least have a chance of manifesting them into reality. And I learned it at a very deep level at a very young age. And that film became what started a 20-year career shooting first movies and then stills for the Geographic. Out there now, living that vision, celebrating what was right with the world. Except now it wasn't a question of I won't believe it till I see it. Now it was, I'll see it because I believe it. I'll see it because I believe it. Man, and I believed it. I believed it, and I see it in everything. I mean, you know that's true, right? They'd send me out to places I'd never been. I believed there would be beautiful landscapes to photograph. They'd appear. I believed those landscapes would be full of wonderful people. They'd be there. Celebrating what's right with the world. It was a vision that had purpose and passion for everybody in the organization. Do you have a vision like that? Not just for New Skin, for yourself. A vision that you could distill down into 6 words, your own private bumper sticker. A vision that every day when you got up and said those 6 words, you said, yes. Yes, that's why you're doing whatever it is you're doing. Because I'll tell you, when the vision is clear, when the vision is just juicy enough, then passion and creativity are there as well. And when passion and creativity are there, discipline and commitment are non-issues. I know that. And you know that.
Yeah.
I know that because I lived it. I lived it. If we could have the lights, please. I lived it. All of a sudden, I wasn't looking at those pictures on the printed page. I was there. I was there, and what an incredible place there was. If we could have the pictures up. all the screens? All of a sudden, I wasn't looking at the printed page, I was there. From the tallest mountains, to rivers drenched in sunlight, to waterfalls and rainbows. I kept thinking of the words of the poet Robinson Jeffers, who wrote, "Is it not by his high superfluousness that we know our God? Is it not by his high superfluousness that we know our God? For to meet a need is natural, animal, mineral. But to throw rainbows over the rain or hide them in seashells." Everywhere I looked, there would be amazing beauty for me to photograph, and in those landscapes were lessons that would change my life. The conservationist John Muir once wrote, "When we try and pick out any one thing by itself, we'll find it hitched to everything else in the universe." And the more I photographed, the more nature showed me that connection and beauty graced by light. And yet, you know, in the Geographic's view, man was not something separate from this. Just as magical, just as unique as anything else on the planet.
That's right.
And the more I just went out and celebrated the best in humankind, the more I could see it. I could see it in the faces of those at work, or the body language of those at play, those in their youth, or in their age. Can you believe this guy? I thought this was going to be a good picture before he smiled, right? I could see it. I could see that light that shines not on us, but from within us. From within us when we have the courage to let it out. It was the same light I'd seen in nature that didn't seem to have to trust to expose itself, but just graced us every day with the delicacy of a flower or the light of a breaking storm. And it was my job to celebrate it, the very best that we had to offer. And the more I believed it, the more I would see it. Everywhere I looked, the banquet was light. And yet, you know, the more I shot for the Geographic, the more there was this strange tension growing up between the worldview of the Geographic and the worldview that I've been raised in since I was a child. You know, my intellectual paradigm, my stone chipper's paradigm, if you will. I mean, you all know it. The law of the jungle, eat or be eaten, my win is your loss, second place is the first loser. I saw that on a t-shirt the other day, you know? That is a very depressing way to look at life. Now, maybe it's how we had to look at it when we dragged ourselves to the mouth of our cave every morning and ran into a saber-toothed tiger, but come on. Everybody in this room is playing life at a lot higher level than that. And yet when we get scared or fearful, that's the paradigm that rises up. But boy, that's not what nature was showing me. Nature was showing me incredible beauty and possibility standing just beyond the rat race saying, hello, hello. All was there if I was open enough to see it. I mean, come on. Mother Nature never stood in front of a forest and said, there is one great photograph hidden here. One photographer will find it, and the rest of you will be hopeless losers. No, nature said, how many rolls you got, Dewitt? Bring it on. Bring it on. I'll fill it up. I'll fill it up with beauty and possibility beyond your wildest imaginings, right down to my tiniest seed. And that was just a much more elegant philosophy, a much more compassionate way of looking at the universe. And at some point, I just decided to embrace it. I just decided that if I had a choice between a world based on scarcity and fear and one based on possibility, then man, I was choosing possibility.
Amen.
And that no matter how dry and desolate, no matter how bleak and devoid of possibility as a situation might seem, that I would just believe that if I could fall in love with it, I could find a perspective, in this case just by dropping down into that slot canyon and looking back the other way, a perspective that would transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Nature was sharing with me one of her most important lessons. Time and again she would show me that there's more than one right answer. There's more than one right answer. I mean, it seems so simple, but it is the key to creativity. There are 1,000 ways to come at any challenge we face to find that extraordinary view, and I know it so easily from my photography, but sometimes it's just so hard to bring over in the rest of my life. They sent me to a little town called Smith River. They raise about 80% of the Easter lilies in the country around that village, and that's the story I had to tell. So I've got a perspective where I got picked lilies and unpicked lilies, the boy picking them, good body language as he puts them in the box, a little bit of the region's architecture and the weather. One right answer, a pretty good one. But boy, as a photographer, I never stopped there. Immediately, I grabbed another lens, walked over a couple rows, knelt down, and found another right answer. Same parameters to the problem, now seen from a totally different point of view. And my favorite right answer that day was this one. This is a particular technique where you can levitate. I'll be teaching it just after the break. Actually, somebody had a chopper in the fields. I get a ride, get up a couple hundred feet, look down, see the extraordinary and the ordinary. 3 right answers. So many things begin to change in your life when you come at the world from that perspective of more than one right answer. I mean, first of all, you don't stop at the initial right answer. Come on, that's just doing our job. None of you would be here in this room today if you stopped at the initial right answer. But the kick is that when you really believe it, then as you press out looking for that next right answer, which you're asked to do every day, you do so not in terror, but comfortably, knowing it's going to be there for you. And you really do begin to embrace change rather than fear it. You really do hit the day with a sense of possibility, not paralysis. And you just get more and more comfortable with reframing a problem, a challenge, into an opportunity. They sent me up to the Selkirk Mountains of British Columbia. Gorgeous area. I'm wandering around, I find a field of dandelions. I should have been ecstatic, but I was not in a seize the day kind of mood. And I looked out over that field, instead of grabbing my cameras and running into it, I took a snapshot. I said, I don't know, the light's not quite right, I'll come back tomorrow. I didn't engage. We all know what happens when you don't engage. Tomorrow turns into the next day turns into the next week, and by the time I got back to that field, no more dandelions. I had puffballs. I wanted dandelions, I had puffballs, and I'm just about to leave when this little voice in my head says, DeWitt, what's right with this situation? What's here to celebrate? You wanted dandelions. You got puffballs. 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 Pretty soon I'm down on the ground with the puffballs. I'm rolling around with the puffballs. I'm on top of the puffballs. I'm underneath the puffballs. And all of a sudden, whoa, that extraordinary view. Believe me, it always seemed to be there if I was open enough to look for it. So when we come at the world from that perspective of more than one right answer, not only do we learn to reframe problems into opportunities, we also begin to lose that fear of mistakes or setbacks. This is the Butter and Eggs Day parade in Petaluma, California. I lived in Petaluma. Oh, good, we got some out there. I lived in Petaluma for 9 years, and I raised my kids there. And every spring they'd be in the festival, and I'd get out and take pictures. And one year I'm out there, I look over, there's a veteran handing flags to the kids beside the road. And I think, great shot, right? So I'm a pro, I'm going to capture it. So I slap on a telephoto lens, and I ran over there, and I missed it. Nobody's given anything to anybody. It's a mistake. But you know, we don't learn without trying new things. We don't learn without stretching ourselves. We don't learn without making mistakes. In fact, do you know that the average Geographic article is shot in 400 rolls of film? That's over 14,000 images to get the 30 that go in an article. 14,000 tries. And now with digital, it's about twice that.
Wow.
I'm not worried about making mistakes. I'm looking for the next right answer. Did I get it? No, I got E.T.'s hand over there at the right. I didn't. You know, amateur photographers will come up to me and they'll say, DeWitt, how many good ones do you get on an 8-gig card? I said, I'm sorry, that's the amateur question. That's the question based on fear of making mistakes. I turn it back to him. I say, I'm sorry, that's the amateur question. The professional question is, did you get it? Did you get it? I mean, we all know when those right answers come into our business and in our lives, they just go ka-chong, you know, and you got it. But it doesn't happen unless you're willing to press out on the edge of your own comfortable envelope, to take that risk, to look for the next right answer. I mean, come on, it is not trespassing to go beyond your own boundaries. How many good ones did you get in a roll of 36? No. Did you get it? So how do we answer that question? Yes, every day in our businesses. When I go out after an extraordinary vision, there were 4 steps that I try and go through. And the first one was to train my technique. Train my technique, because vision without technique is blind. It's fine to have a lovely vision, but if you don't have the technique and technology to manifest it, you have nothing. So I'd spend days, weeks, months, years with my technique, f-stops and shutter speeds and strobes, so that when nature did open a window of possibility, I wasn't worried about what lens was on my camera. I was there ready to capture it. I call this one midlife rebirth. So first I want to train my technique. And then I want to put myself in the place of most potential. Okay, so if the world is going to open up multiple windows of possibility, where do I have the best chance of finding it? So I was doing a book for the Geographic on Lake Powell. And I'm flying in and we're taking some morning aerials, and I look down at what I thought was an uninhabited and uninhabitable part of the lake. And some of you can see down here, over on the right, there's a little road and a car. God, I didn't even know anybody could get out there. And yet seeing it, I knew it was possible. So I came back to my campsite, I looked at the maps, that point was in the perfect direction. Picked up another book, figured out that the day that I wanted to be there, rented a 4-wheel drive, stuffed it with revisions, bumped all the way out to that overlook. But boy, I was there in the place of most potential the night the full moon rose over the lake. And when you're there in the place of most potential with your techniques down, man, those right answers just keep coming. Train your technique. Put yourself in the place of most potential. And then the third step, God, it seems like the easiest, but I think it's the hardest. And that's just to open to possibilities. Possibilities you never dreamed of. So I'm shooting a little article on Marine World. And I shot the killer whales and the dolphins and the water skiers and the tigers. You know, I was done. I had it. I'm coming back to the car. And then just out of the corner of my eye, just out of my peripheral vision, I saw what they call a dancing fountain. I mean, you've seen them. The water comes out of one, goes into another one, you know, big parabola going into the next one. It looks like a big worm going across the horizon. And this kid has his hand on the source. And he's waiting, and so am I. And he's ready, and so am I. And I know what that next right answer is going to be. And man, I nailed it. But I'm not putting on the brakes. I'm not closing down. I'm not thinking this is the only right answer, because if I did, I never would have seen this one. You know, just being open every day in our businesses to possibilities we never dreamed of. When the great photographer Minor White would go out to photograph, he would never say, "What will I take today?" Rather, he would ask, "What will I be given today?" And I would add, will I be open enough to recognize it? Train your technique. Put yourself in the place of most potential. Open to possibilities. And then finally, focus your vision by celebrating what's right in the situation. Live that vision at the Geographic. So no matter how weird a situation I'd walk into, the first thing I'm going to ask is, what's here to celebrate? What am I falling in love with? Well, in this case, it's easy, because that happens to be my daughter, right? So I know what I'm falling in love with. But it didn't matter. Whenever I could get a lock on what was right with the situation, then I could use all my technique and technology to enhance that and get rid of everything else. Instead of starting out, as we so often do, by griping about what's wrong with the situation, what's right with it? Because that connects us with our passion. That emancipates the energy. By celebrating what's right, we find the energy to fix what's wrong. As Michelangelo once wrote, I saw an angel in the stone and carved to set it free. I saw an angel in the stone and carved to set it free. So that just became the way I would shoot. They'd send me out to amazing places like Rose Spit at the top of Graham Island in the Queen Charlottes of British Columbia. And on that amazing piece of real estate, the Haida Indians believed that mankind was first created when Raven opened up a clamshell and let him out. And I was lucky enough to be there one evening with two Haida dancing on the beach. This is one of the first pictures. The drummer in the background, the boy dancing in the foreground. And I'm saying, what am I falling in love with? What's here to celebrate? And at that moment, it was just the boy's face. So I zoomed in on that. And I'm loving this picture, but even as I'm taking it, this little voice in my head says, hey, Dewitt, nice right answer, but you're too close. It's now just a shot of a child. It's no longer a shot of a Haida. You've forgotten who you are, where he is. And so even though this was a really nice right answer, quickly, easily, comfortably, I let it go. Let it go, zoomed back a bit, picked up the paddle. Much better photograph. In fact, the Geographic agreed and ran it as the opening spread in the article. And what I began to see, you know, in our lives, it's not about finding the right answer. It's not even about finding another right answer. What our lives are about, what our businesses are about, are continually finding the next right answer. Twisting that focus ring of our lives back and forth, keeping that extraordinary vision in focus. And the more I would do that, and this is one of the most important things I've got to share with you, the more I would do that, both in my photography and in my life, the more I would find that the difference in my business between a good frame and a really great frame was usually measured in millimeters, not miles. That close every day if I was open enough to it. Good frame, a morning glory on the beach in Maui, 10 inches away. Great frame, great frame. Good frame, a cowboy in Bryce Canyon, believe it or not, named Binky. And I'm taking Binky's picture and I'm loving it, but even as I'm taking it, I watch another cowboy walk out of the barn behind him, and as he crosses the threshold of the door, this beautiful shaft of light hits his face. So as he moved away, I just backed Binky up about 30 feet. Great frame, great frame. Good frame, the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset with the new moon rising. Man, how does it get any better? 15 minutes later, great frame. When we believe it, we'll see it. So I'm looking out over the audience and I'm seeing some heads going up and down. You folks know these techniques. You wouldn't be here as successful as you are if you didn't. So my question to you this morning is, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? How do we all take it to the next level? How do you go beyond a home run? Man, I've been thinking a lot about that in my own life. How do I take it to the next level? Thinking back over my whole career, thinking back to the very first day that I had the courage to stick my head out there and begin it all. And I got out there in my career and I was working, I was flapping. There was a lot of flapping going on in the beginning, you know.